always been different. Not holding friendships was not a problem for him. He preferred solitude. But now, as his uncle lay in a casket before him, Isaac was going to find out the true reason for his strange behavior and attitude toward men's misgivings. Sit back, darken the room, and silence your mind as we tell the terrifying tale of Isaac Merrick. The funeral was sparsely attended, mostly by elderly acquaintances who shuffled in with sighs indicating they didn't really want to be there, mingling with the soft rustle of attire fit for the occasion. The air was thick with incense and disdain, clinging to the dust motes swirling lazily in the shafts of sunlight that sliced through the stained glass windows. As the solemn proceedings began, the whispers started. Stories about a recluse who had lived and died alone, with secrets buried in the bones of a crumbling estate. The greedy voices continuing into whispers about the wealth that had been hoarded and left behind. The grotesque voices continued into louder whispers as the attendees peered around to one another. The question of which of these no-name acquaintances would become the beneficiary of the fortune amassed over the lifetime of the deceased and those before him. It hovered in the air like a fog. Isaac Merrick sat at the back of the chapel, disconnected from the haze of false, muted sorrow, unfeeling, uncaring. He didn't know the man, yet he admired the way in which these parasites latched onto grief as a way of showing their loyalty for the estate of the empty vessel resting in the coffin. He didn't understand what drew him to this ceremony for the dead, other than the curiosity. But it was clear this man had no one who actually cared that he was gone, including Isaac himself. As Isaac looked around the room at the faces hiding their sinister smiles, not many seemed to notice him sitting alone, but he preferred it that way. Isaac didn't bother getting cleaned up for this oh-so-special occasion, but he didn't feel any guiltier about it than everyone else in this mortuary looked. His dark hair was slightly greasy as he slowly brushed it from his face with his fingers. Intent. Your actions and movements should always show intent, he had been told at some point, although he couldn't quite remember by whom. As he looked around, an elderly man who seemed to be of some wealth noticed Isaac as he walked by. He became startled and quickly turned away from Isaac and hurried past him to his seat next to a woman adorning a designer dress. The man glanced back with a fearful look, then turned to the woman and whispered something inaudible into her ear. But Isaac knew what he was saying. He was no stranger to this reaction. Most of his life, he himself had been a loner and knew he had a demeanor about him that raised blood pressure in those around. He was used to the whispers that came with his odd appearance. He gave a slight chuckle as the left corner of his mouth pulled taut into a smile. A couple more times the elderly gentleman looked back at Isaac with a feared look, checking if Isaac was still there. And Isaac never broke eye contact. He enjoyed this. Isaac spoke under his breath. "I'm not here for the money, old-timer," and folded his hands into his lap as he stared into the back of the man's head. Yeah, this was fun for him. Isaac's great-uncle, Alden Merrick, was a stranger to him, a ghost of familial obligation now anchored by the finality of death. Alden had been the black sheep of the family, an eccentric whose peculiarities had ensured his isolation. The Merrick family had long severed ties, leaving Isaac to sift through the remnants of a life veiled in mystery. When the last of Isaac's family had passed away before his uncle, Isaac had forgotten all about the uncle that he had been warned against. Not that he ever cared to remember, anyway. Isaac believed his entire family to be above average when it came to being oddities. So if this guy was strange by their standards, yeah, Isaac wished he had known him. But it left him wanting to know why his family had abandoned this relic. It wasn't until he heard the excited chirpings around town that he knew the old man had passed, died. It was no hard decision to attend the funeral. After all, it left Isaac as the last of the Merrick family, and he wanted to be sure the man was truly dead. Isaac calling his family weird, strange, or whatever wasn't an exaggeration, but he realized he was probably the most aberrant if he were to judge himself off social standards. And being at this man's funeral cemented that fact into the family's history books. Isaac sat through the funerary proceedings with a lack of empathy, both for the deceased and for those in attendance. To Isaac, these false mourners had one foot in the grave, and it would only take a slight nudge before they all fall in, along with his dead uncle, of course. But on this day, Isaac was a mere spectator. There would be no joy in getting the blue-blooded elite worked up beyond the occasional spiteful stare. Okay, maybe a little joy, but it wasn't worth the effort at this time. So he sat through the proceedings in silence with his hands folded in his lap. A week later, Isaac found himself standing before the imposing Merrick Manor, his birthright. Its Victorian architecture weathered by decades of neglect and decay. Impressive, very impressive, thought Isaac to himself with a half-cocked smile. Vines clung stubbornly to the stone walls, their tendrils like fingers grasping at history lost to time and those who came and died before him, incarcerating them within the scarred walls. He hesitated momentarily at the entrance, half expecting some specter of his great uncle to swing open the heavy wooden door, welcoming him into his home. But it remained stubbornly shut, daring him to breach its secrets. And breach it he did, with a stiff shove of his shoulder. The slow movement of the rusty hinges forced the door to scream to life with a terrible shriek, making Isaac wonder how the old man came and went. The day was bright, not a cloud in the sky, but the interior of the mansion matched the facade of the sizable dwelling, dark, unkempt. Without apprehension, Isaac stepped across the threshold into the foyer with strategically placed footsteps, slamming the door shut behind him with another shove of his shoulder. Inside, the manor was a tomb of antiquity, every room steeped in the stale aroma of forgotten eras. Dust lay thick as velvet across the furniture, undisputed in its vigil, as if no one had been there in decades. Isaac could sense the dark wooden slatted walls encased dark secrets, but they held onto them with a silence that swallowed the very sound of Isaac's own thoughts. Isaac could feel the chill of those long gone watching over him. He felt their hollow eyes upon him, but none were visible. Isaac didn't fear ghosts. To him, they were just an imprint on reality stamped by light, impressions left behind similar to a dimensional photograph, leaving a lasting mark on the very soul of the house. Spirits, they were different. Spirits were free to roam, even semi-sentient at times. Still, nothing to be afraid of. Just curious, wandering eyes, disembodied from one cause or another, less harmful than the living, which Isaac despised. Isaac carried on, not paying them the attention they craved. He moved from room to room, slowly cataloging the detritus of a man's life, faded photographs, brittle books, trinkets that whispered of places far beyond his reach, carefully examining the remnants of 1,000 lives full of intrigue, being sure not to touch anything that he may leave an imprint on. Not that he minded getting his black button-down shirt and black slacks dirty. It was just his belief that you shouldn't go into someone's home and rummage through it, dead or alive. Isaac crossed the foyer once again and headed toward the extravagant, ornate stairs. Large canvas paintings lined the stairs leading up into the darkness. Portraits of some who Isaac recognized: his father, his grandfather, an aunt. Others seemed much older, unrecognizable, if he had to guess, dating back at least 200 years or older. The faded paint was hard to make out on some of them, leaving silhouettes with piercing eyes staring at Isaac with an accusative tone as he ascended the hard wood staircase into the black air above. The second level wasn't much different than the first, save for one room that had obviously been his uncle's. It wasn't clean, and it reeked with a musty smell, and the bed in this room wasn't covered completely in dust, just traces of blood on the sheets. Isaac scoffed, circling the interior of the room, taking mental inventory, but being careful not to touch anything. Not afraid of it. He just wanted to respect the dead, no matter the strange stories he had heard of the old man who lived here. He was gone now. There was no sense in disturbing what he had built, and those who had come and gone before his uncle. When Isaac finished looking through the room, he crossed the threshold back into the hallway, closing the door gently behind him. He tapped on the door twice and whispered, "Sleep." Call it superstition or family tradition, it's something he had always done. He walked lightly down the hall back in the direction he came from, so lightly that not one board creaked under his weight, as if he were trying to keep his presence unknown. Isaac's exploration led him back downstairs to a study on the first floor, where the walls were lined with shelves and lay into the wooden walls, sagging under the weight of obscure tomes. Along each of the outer support beams hung sconces, long burned out, except one. As Isaac passed it, he could smell the hint of oiled smoke emanating from it. What do you want to show me, old man? Isaac thought to himself, feeling the piercing eyes upon him. He stepped to the bookcase and peered at the section of the library contained within. The books seemed ancient, the leather bindings written in a language Isaac couldn't quite make out. But disturbing the books in their resting place seemed like a sin he wasn't quite ready to commit. Not just yet. Not that Isaac was pious by any means, quite the opposite. Not wicked, but the ideas of some God creating and controlling everything never sat well with him. He liked to believe he was the master of his own destiny, but these crusty, leather-bound books deserved peace. For now. A rustling sound came from over Isaac's left shoulder, as if someone were digging through papers and tossing them aside. Isaac turned slowly, aware that there were at least a few spirits hanging on to their past lives in this old dark house. As he punctured the dimly lit room with its striking blue eyes, it was just as he suspected. Nothing was there. Nothing but an ornate desk dominated the floor space of the center of the room, its surface cluttered with yellowed papers with notes scribbled along the columns in the same strange language the book bindings were written. Among the papers, a leather-bound box caught Isaac's eye, its surface marred by age and neglect. On top, Isaac could see through the layers of dust and dirty handprints. A single word had been scribed onto it in delicate writing. Isaac. It was a rule of Isaac's not to disturb the possessions of those who have passed, but this was clearly a scenario that warranted it. As Isaac raised the lid, he swore he heard a faint gasp come from the multiple directions, and dust cascaded from the box's lid's surface. His gloved hands careful not to permanently mar the surface as the contents revealed themselves. As he peered inside, he discovered a collection of Polaroid photos, their surfaces dull with gradual fading. Handwriting on the tabs indicated the same strange language of symbols or hieroglyphs, illegible. He lifted the first photo and wiped it clean with his sleeve. The image came into focus as the dim light streaked through the windows to reinvigorate the chemicals contained within the outdated technology. A snapshot of a man standing alone atop a surrounding that was both majestic and haunting. A desert, bleak and arid, not one that Isaac recognized right away. The man in the photo was dressed in an antiquated suit, a bowler hat perched jauntily atop his head, but his eyes were obscured by shadows and the distance of whomever had snapped the shot, as though the camera had captured something it shouldn't have. Isaac squinted at the background, trying to gain some form of control over the details of the figure and its surroundings, unanchored to any place he recognized. And Isaac was a well-traveled man. A Polaroid of a man wearing clothing that predated the technology that captured it. But there was something even more peculiar. The shadow of the man seemed to have two light sources striking the very ground at his feet, casting a long shadow to the left and a shorter, more confined shadow in front of the man. "Nice trick, Uncle," Isaac squeaked out between his lips. He shuffled through the many photos, each one depicting the same man, holding the same position with arms at his side, staring straight into the lens, in various locations that defied geography and logic. An endless desert beneath a blood-red sky, a forest of petrified trees twisted into grotesque shapes, leafless, yet life exuded from the very bark of the trees. A cityscape where the buildings loomed at impossible angles. Each scene was more surreal than the last, and in each photo, the man was closer to the photographer than the last, although no less distorted. His fascination deepened into curious obsession. Who was this man? And where had these photos been taken? Isaac spent hours poring over the images, tracing the outlines of the landscapes with a finger, trying to penetrate the veil of their mystery. The air around him grew thick with a creeping unease, a sense that the shadows in the photos were bleeding into his reality as nightfall became imminent. But time was of no consequence to Isaac. This dark mystery was too enticing, the images disturbing, yet intriguing. The question of why a man he never knew had written his name on this box of obtrusive photographs lay in the back of Isaac's mind, as if to bore a hole into his psyche. If this were his house now, he would take it and its darkness with stride. Isaac found some old quilts in an old steamer trunk in the office. He shook the dust from them and spread them across the floor as a makeshift bed. He didn't mind the age nor the condition of the quilts. It gave him a sort of familiarity, and his mind was locked on his recent discovery held within the photographs. He laid holding the photographs up so the light from a single oil lamp could strike them from new angles, possibly showing him something he hadn't noticed before. Turning the pictures, staring into them as if he could feel the surroundings trapped within the plastic, the shapes shifting with the light as if to present a new three-dimensional perspective. As he moved the oil lamp around the photos, shadows moved, twisting, lunging from one corner to another of the room, escaping the dreaded light, hiding. Isaac smirked A trick of the moving light, he was sure, but to ignore the fact that he had been watched from the moment he entered the house was naive. Either way, it was of no concern. That night, deep sleep eluded him. He lay in bed, the Polaroid spread across the blanket like a constellation of enigmas. He drifted in and out of a fitful slumber, only to be jolted awake by a sound, a soft rustling, the pages of an old book turning in the wind, slowly churning, one after another. His eyes shot open as he glanced toward the large mahogany desk. Nothing. Cowards, he spoke softly to the empty room, his heart maintaining a constant rhythm in his chest as he peered into the darkened room, his eyes adjusting to the lack of light. He looked down, and the Polaroids lay untouched. But when Isaac raised one to the dim moonlight, he could swear the shadows within them had shifted, and the figure seemed a bit closer in each one, still out of focus and obscured by deep shadows. He chuckled slightly. There you are, and laid the photos beside him. Isaac forced his eyes shut, the excitement of the house's aura begging him to hold his eyelids open. But he vowed he would return to the mystery after just a bit of sleep. But as he lay back down, he caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye, a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim moonlight barely illuminating the hall behind the figure. It wore a bowler hat, its features obscured in the same deep shadows from the photographs. Isaac sat up, unafraid. A smile cracked Isaac's lips. He extended his arm beside his makeshift bed to fumble for the lamp. As he struck the match and the lamp began to brighten, there became a warm glow that banished the apparition. The doorway was empty, the other shadows retreating into their corners. He stared at the space where the figure had been, his mind a whirl of intrigue. Had it been a trick of the light? A product of his excited mind? Or was the man in the photos now coming to him? Whatever the case, there was no way Isaac wasn't going to leave this house until he unlocked its secrets. Days turned into weeks. The days became cold, the nights even colder. Snow embanked on the windowsill as the flakes danced wildly in the wind, as if to taunt Isaac. And Isaac became a recluse within the manor, consumed by the enigma of the Polaroids. He studied the images obsessively, convinced they held some secret he was meant to uncover. He barely ate or slept, his world narrowing to the confines of the photographs and the strange places they depicted, along with the shadows moving along the mansion. Isaac had seen strange things within the borders of his family, but this was an abnormality, a happy one in the eyes of Isaac. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Isaac noticed something he hadn't seen before. In one of the photographs, the man stood at the edge of a vast lake, its surface like liquid glass reflecting a storm-laden sky. But it wasn't the landscape that caught his attention. It was the man's hand. Isaac brought the photo closer, squinting at the man's outstretched hand. A ring adorned his finger, its design intricate and hauntingly familiar. The photo was a mystery in itself, other than just the content. The ring was completely in focus, more than a mere Polaroid should be able to produce. But the rest of the figure was blurred, as in all the other photos. He had seen this ring before, buried among the clutter in the study, a ring etched with cryptic symbols nestled within a velvet-lined box, the same box that the photographs had been in. The realization sent a shiver down his spine, a sense that the boundaries between the photographs and his reality were blurring. To feel that chill again was exhilarating. It had been so long since something had elicited a physical response from his own nervous system. He savored the moment, holding on to the chills for as long as he could. Compelled by a force he couldn't explain, Isaac retrieved the ring and slipped it onto his finger. A chill shot through him, a tingling sensation that crawled beneath his skin. He returned to the photograph, examining the landscape with newfound clarity. The lake seemed to ripple beneath his gaze, the clouds swirling with the life of their own motion, movement. Yet the figure was still blurred, except the ring, which was no longer in the photograph. Shallow sounds of laughter erupted from the dark corners of the room. Isaac peered around with his signature half smile, knowing damn well there was something there with him, too afraid to make their presences known. He looked into the photo again, but this time the figure was gone. Isaac held the photo at different angles as the waves began to crash, but there was no figure. He lowered the photo to grab another. Again, the figure was missing. Then another, and another with the same result. Looking up, he saw the man in the bowler hat standing in the doorway of the study once again, hand outstretched, reaching toward Isaac. Isaac continued his smile, then removed the ring from his fingers slowly. The man dissipated into a thin cloud of gray smoke, and the laughter ceased. He raised the photos again, and the figure had returned inside the still images of the eerie landscapes, unmoving, hands at his sides. The air in the room seemed to vanish all at once and tasted sweet on Isaac's lips, his breath steaming into the air in white puffs of heated smoke, his eyes fixated on the photos as his hands absorbed their energy. His heart pounded with anticipation, a mad urge to step into the photo, to become part of its alien landscape. He could feel the vibration beneath his skin, rising as goosebumps pushed their way to the surface. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a smile formed on his thin lips. It had been a long time since he felt anything at all. This was stimulating, to say the least. He knew it was madness, but a whispering voice in his mind, or just outside his head, urged him onward, promising answers to questions he hadn't spoken aloud. He looked around the dark room and into the darker corners, his smile fading into a scowl. As if he was speaking to someone, he softly muttered, "You almost had me," then chuckled into the airless room. That night, he dreamed of the man in the bowler hat. They stood together on the shore of the lake from the photographs, the water lapping just before reaching their feet, the air salty, yet full of fragrances that felt intimate. The man turned to him, his eyes hollow voids that sucked in the light, like two tiny black holes from which nothing could escape. Before this moment, Isaac had thought the shadows had obscured the man's face, but now it was clear his face was the shadow. Yet he couldn't lose the feeling that this man was someone close to Isaac, even if he couldn't place who he was or recognize him. The sun drained of all its light above the darkening lake as the waves ceased. The sun, a dark spot in the sky, desolate, devoid of any feature distinguishing it as a source of life. The water as black as the sky. There was no sound. The air didn't move. Isaac glanced at the man curiously, and when he spoke, his voice was a rasping echo reverberated through Isaac's bones, exciting every nerve in Isaac's body. "You seek the truth," the man said, his words dripping with malice. "But the truth is a poison that devours the soul." His words hung in the air as if the air had captured the sound and halted it where it was released, encapsulating it. Isaac awoke with a start, drenched in sweat. The room was stifling, the air heavy with an oppressive weight. He glanced at the Polaroids scattered across the floor, their images flickering with a faint luminescence. They pulsed in the rhythm with his heartbeat, an invitation and a warning wrapped in one. Isaac glanced at the ring lying by his head on the thick wooden floor. The temptation to put it on again flooded his spirit. Without a thought otherwise, Isaac grabbed the ring and slowly slid it onto his middle finger. The laughter raised from the corners of the room once more, from the darkest of shadows. The moon emitted a soft glow filtered by the stained windows as Isaac saw the voices come to life in slow, jerky motions from one shadow to the next. The laughing continued and grew louder slowly. Isaac creaked the corner of his mouth to a half smile and chuckled along with the disembodied voices. Shadows contorted, twisted, writhed in agonizing pain, but it brought them pleasure. Driven by a force beyond reason, he picked up the photo of the lake, holding it close as though it were a lifeline out of some dark instinctual act. The room around him faded, the walls dissolving into mist. The floor drained from his feet. He felt a pull, a tug at the edges of his consciousness, drawing him into the depths of the images. Isaac felt his eyes sink, retracting into his skull. The sound of an approaching storm delighted his senses as he submitted to the will of the powers around him. Clouds thickened into black smoke, combining with one another, absorbing each other, until there was no visible sky. He looked onto the horizon as streaks of lightning crashed into the waves and traveled through the thick, black clouds. The transition was seamless, a gentle slide from reality into a dreamscape. He stood on the shore of the lake, the air charged with an electric energy. The storm overhead crackled with menace, the clouds swirling like a living entity. Isaac felt a thrill of fear and exhilaration. The boundary between his world and the one within the photos shattered. He turned, half expecting to see the man in the bowler hat beside him, but he was alone, the only witness to this otherworldly vista. He felt the ring on his finger grow warm, its presence a reminder of the link between him and this strange reality, a new reality that Isaac was welcoming, even inviting it. As he explored the landscape, he was drawn to the peculiarities of this world, the twisted trees that whispered secrets, the shadows that danced with a life of their own. Each step felt like an unveiling, a revelation of truths hidden behind the veneer of normalcy. Isaac didn't mind the twisted shadows dancing around him in horrific pain as he saw them illuminate with every crack of the lightning. Deafening thunder surrounded him as he carefully placed one foot in front of the other, leaving no footprints in the sand. The further he ventured, the more the landscape shifted, as though responding to his presence. The lake receded, replaced by a forest of skeletal trees that loomed like ancient watchers. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the ground soft beneath his feet. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, darting between the trees like phantoms, exposing themselves only for a quick dance of the dead around his perimeter, then retreating to the darkness. Isaac's slow pace continued, emboldened with confidence and a disturbingly deep apathy. Nihilistic in his new surrounding, he felt the absence of any sort of creator. Isaac felt a growing sense of unease, a realization that he was not alone in this hauntingly beautiful place, apart from the dark spirits celebrating his arrival into this plane. Voices whispered softly through the air. The sounds so physically real, he felt he could touch them with his thinning fingertips. The whispers grew louder, an insidious chorus that clawed at the edges of his sanity, penetrating his every sense. He maintained his methodical pace, the forest closing in around him as if to embrace his presence. Tree branches reaching out to gently touch the one who would be. The voices grew into a harsh, growling tone, encouraging him to embrace what he has become. Then he saw it, a figure standing among the trees, watching him with unblinking eyes. It was the man from the coffin, his form distinct, like a reflection in murky water, but somehow Isaac knew the man, Alden Merrick. Anticipation clutched at Isaac's heart, yet he felt compelled to approach, drawn by the promise of answers that were slowly revealing themselves with every step toward the man, darkened by shadows and obscured by a hazy blur. The man, unmoving, was just as distorted the closer Isaac approached. Yet there was no fear within Isaac. There had never been fear for as long as he could remember. He wondered if he should even feel the cold, icy hands of fear, but quickly brushed the thought aside. Closer still to the black spirit, the apparition reached his hand toward Isaac's own, gripped his wrist, and twisted the ring slowly on Isaac's finger. As he pulled the ring from Isaac's fingers slowly, the man didn't make an audible sound, but Isaac could hear his words within his head, vibrating through his skull as if he was being shaken apart from the inside. With the deep-seated words in his head, the trees warbled around him. Shadows emerged from all directions, spirits dancing and screaming ritualistically. The words Isaac was hearing within himself made no sense. They weren't the answers he was looking for. Then the ring slipped from Isaac's finger with a violent jerk from the dark apparition. Isaac could feel the man's half-smile mimicking that of Isaac's own, although he couldn't see through the shadow masking his identity. Isaac felt a rush of excruciating pain throughout every muscle and tendon in his body. As his jaw fell open, only to let out a silent scream, he was jolted back to the spot where he had placed the ring on his finger, standing in the study of his deceased uncle's mansion. The laughter from the shadows was gone. The dark room still held prying eyes on him. He could feel them prying into his very core, silent in their observations, sticking to the shadows of the black corners of the room. Isaac could feel their presence as he rubbed his burning finger, the unease of the answers that had never come, burning in his brain like lava, creating physical pain Isaac had never felt. He collapsed to his knees, but otherwise contained his pain inside, looking to the corners of the room with tightened eyes and a sideways smile. He muttered, "I won't break that easily." A slow shuffling sound came from each corner, then abruptly stopped. Isaac rose his torso and grabbed the photographs. The man and scenery still unchanged. Light shifted in the doorway as Isaac raised his head slowly to see the man in the bowler hat. Then the man stepped closer with silent steps, slow, carefully placed footsteps. The air plucked the very breath from Isaac's lungs as the man drew closer. "You've seen the photographs, glimpsed the shadows between worlds. You're tied to this place, more than you know." A shiver ran down Isaac's spine, his skin prickling with an unease that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. He realized, with a dawning sense of horror and at the same time satisfaction, that the figure in front of him shared his own face, warped and obscured, yet unmistakably his own. The realization twisted the fibers of his mortal shell, a visceral reaction to the uncanny resemblance, the voice eerily his own. "Tell me more," Isaac spoke with less arrogance, the words pooling from his very lips as if they were being sucked out of him. The man, or rather, Isaac's reflection standing before him, gestured to the world around him. "The Merrick family bears a curse, a legacy of darkness passed down through generations. You're the sole survivor of a lineage that straddles two realities, the mundane world you know, and the dimension where shadows hold sway and the collection of wicked souls become bound." Isaac, unfazed, felt he had always known this truth, that his being was not that of a normal man. Isaac smiled slightly as it all became clear. His doppelganger chuckled, a sound that resonated like a knife scraping against glass. "Ignorance does not equate to innocence. The photos are a gateway, revealing the truth of our existence. Alden sought to escape it, but he, too, was drawn back into the darkness." Memories flashed before Isaac's eyes, snippets of conversations overheard in childhood, whispers of a family history shrouded in secrets. His parents had never spoken of this great uncle. The mention of Alden Merrick met with silence or averted gazes. The pieces fell into place with a sickening clarity, revealing a lineage tainted by shadows, destined to live among their darkness. Memories of his younger years eased into his mind with unhindered offense. Memories of every place shown in the photos. This was where he was from. This other realm. The realm of demons and spirits. It was his father who split the family. The memories were there. Then, a final memory. He wasn't just of otherworldly beings from another plane of reality. He was of a lineage of men who collected souls of the dying, passed down among the men strong enough to bear the burden. And they didn't just collect any soul. The wretched, the lost, the deserving of an eternity in darkness and decay. Isaac's heart raced, the truth clawing at the edges of his sanity. The landscapes in the Polaroids were not foreign lands, but echoes of memories buried beneath the surface of his consciousness. His obsession with the photos had unlocked something within him, a connection to a world he had long since pulled from, and in that moment, he was ready to return. The man, Isaac's double, stepped closer, extending a hand. Isaac reached his own hand toward him, with his palm facing up. Into his hand, the man in the bowler hat dropped the ring, ice cold. So cold it burned Isaac's palm, but Isaac didn't pull away. He gripped the ring tight inside his fist and lowered his hand to his side slowly. The sounds of soft laughter came from the corners of the room as red eyes peered from the shadows and leapt around the room in frantic excitement. Clawing at the walls, tearing at the floor, dark mist pouring from their bodiless souls. Isaac regarded them with a wicked smile as they danced around him. Slowly, the man in the bowler hat sank to the floor in a fog and joined the celebration as one of them. As the demons and spirits reveled all around, Isaac walked with a slow intent to the desk. The yellowed pages with the strange symbols now made sense. They were legible to the heir of this mansion and its inhabitants. Isaac sat and lit the lamp on the desk, scouring through every scrap of paper, papers that told of his ancient lineage, birth records of him and everyone before him. The dark spirits continued their ritual all around Isaac, circling him, laughing, chanting, howling into the dead air. Ancient scriptures of a language obscured from the eyes of men detailed what was to come for Isaac as the embodiment of death itself. He narrowed his eyes, understanding his distaste for most humans. It was born into him. Then, a scripture describing the ring forged in the depths of the eighth ring of hell, Maliboj. Its creation came from a time before man set foot on the earth, before Satan was cast from the heavens, in preparation for the flood of souls to follow and the bloodline that would carry out the task. It was all planned out. The Merrick men had always been the guardians of the ring. Now, Isaac Merrick was to be the last heralding in the end of days. Isaac read on, noting the names of the men through history as the demons continued their dark celebration around him. The screams and laughter seemed to be easy to avoid for Isaac, his full attention on the men on the list. Ezekiel stood out the most. The stories of the face of death from 1800 to 1900 fascinated him on the yellowed parchment. How Ezekiel would lure his victims into a false sense of security just before revealing himself and drawing their souls from their very body in a sort of sick game. Isaac cracked his lips to a sinister grin. He could now feel the hearts of men and their intentions. He finished reading for the evening and stacked the parchments neatly. He turned to face his new friends, and with a snap of his finger, they all vanished into smoke as Isaac inhaled their burnt souls. Drawing them into his lungs, he could feel and taste their fire within him. He slid the ring onto his finger, and he too vanished into a dark cloud. That evening, miles away, Gregory Stantenberg III awoke from a nightmare, only to be greeted by another. Paralyzed by fear, he looked around as a fog in his room hovered. The fog turned to smoke, with the smell of sulfur and fire. Then the smoke materialized into the shapes of demons and spirits surrounding him. One final layer of smoke shape shifted into the form of a man. Gregory gasped. It was the young man from the funeral. Isaac gazed into the old man's eyes. "I told you I wasn't here for the money, old-timer." Isaac drew a deep breath through his mouth as Gregory's spirit dislodged from his body, inhaled into Isaac's own form. Death had found him. The spirits around cheered, then disappeared back into smoke, then fog, then into Isaac's own body. Isaac watched as Gregory's body took its final breath and turned pale gray. Then Isaac dissipated, solidifying his spot as the bringer of death for the wicked. Join me next time as one man finds his worst fears coming true in a twisted tale of games and horror. If you've enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments below. If you've had any visit from those long gone, I'd like to hear about that too. You never know, your story could be told here on my channel. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay caught up on all my twisted horror stories, paranormal, and insanity. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay weird.